I'd like to start with where Dr. Matz joined both the ideas together, and I think all of us need to challenge, resist each one wherever they are, and push the limits so a change can actually take place in our countries and in the idea of solidarity with Palestine. And the idea that was suggested yesterday and repeated again, evidence-based solidarity, I think there is enough actually that supports this case from a legal case, from human rights, from every angle that you look at it. Actually, there is sufficient to challenge the Zionist narrative at every corner. With the question that you were raising, the problem is, as was said, this is the most just cause with the worst lawyers, the case of Palestine, that there is not enough coverage of everything that is being done. We are watching this for the first time in human history, live on our screens, watching a genocide unfold. And the impotence of the world is incredible. The world is not able to put one glass of water into Gaza without the permission of the Israelis. You're not able to take the sick out of Gaza without the permission of the Israelis. This level and the complicity of Western governments, with all the pressure that is put on Western governments, their complicity, I think, is what makes it even worse. But this is in the UK, where I've lived for a very long time. This is being challenged, but it is still needs a lot to be able to challenge this. And I agree with what was mentioned by Siham on this, that the use of anti-Semitism, and this going back to your question, redefining things, the problem is they still play this game. Anti-Semitism is equal to anti-Zionism. And I've had this discussion in so many different places, and it is a big problem. And they use the West anti-Semitism, as was mentioned by the Turkish president, is not a problem in this part of the world. It was never a problem. As you mentioned, the Jews in Palestine lived side by side. You hear Avi Schleim talking about himself growing up in Iraq with his family, and the Zionist ideology pushing it into a different direction and forcing Jews to be Zionists when most of the Jews were actually anti-Zionist. Not just those in Nablus, but also looking at Jews, anti-Zionist Jews in Jerusalem and across the world. These voices need to be heard more. And actually their effect, living in Scotland and talking to someone calling us anti-Semitic for standing for Palestine, and then my Scottish colleague told me, speak to this woman, tell her your story, how your family was expelled from Palestine and so on. I told her, she was not convinced. And we had a Jewish anti-Zionist professor with us. She spoke to her for a few minutes and she turned around. She thought, you're all anti-Semitic. And this guilt of the Holocaust in Europe, together with weaponizing anti-Semitism, actually drives people away from this. So I agree that we need to redefine, but sometimes you have to force your narrative. Redefining, and within, unfortunately, academia, we have a symposium in 2 months on Zionism and academia, pressures, fears, and challenges here in Turkey. And this is a big problem. You see how they got rid of rectors of university for standing not for Palestine, just for not allowing the Zionist narrative to move forward in the United States, and yes, to spread the Zionist propaganda. On the question on Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and what is happening and the interfaith issue, what is happening is an attack on every religion in Palestine. And Israel tries to claim itself as a democracy. when, as Steven Sizer puts it, Israel cannot be a democracy. It only can be a democracy for the Jews, where the others are second class or third class citizens, and does not include the Palestinians. And this idea of pushing a one-state solution is something that Israel does not want. Israel does not want a two-state solution. Israel wants this land, and you've heard the extremist views of their ministers talking about human animals and dehumanizing Palestinians on the one side, and claiming that this land, you need to ethnically cleanse everyone out of this land. They see everyone who is not part of this narrative as the enemy, in a sense. And these attacks there is not enough coverage of what is happening. We will see in the month of Ramadan attacks on Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. This is now certain within the Israeli cabinet. This is going to be, we've seen it since the 7th of October and before the 7th of October, and it's not going to stop. And this symbol for one, Muslims, and two, for Palestinians, whether Muslim or Christian, it has become a Palestinian symbol for those in Palestine, and it is a symbol for the Ummah at large. And I think a lot more needs to be done to expose the real face of Zionism, and I think there is a shift. The Zionist propaganda is not working on this issue. Two other points. I agree with this idea of the ethical superiority, but I agree with what Karim was saying. All the tactics that we are doing is not enough. Seeing the people massacred in Palestine, in Gaza, and in the West Bank, what we're doing, we are failing as humanity, we are failing as the Ummah, and we are failing Palestine, even in every sense. And we need to stop making excuses to this idea of sustainability. How can we sustain this? In order to end this, we were saying this at the start, this war will come to an end, and Gaza will drop out of our agenda until the next war. But this war seems to be never ending. And even with the war going on, Gaza is dropped off the agenda. And this is a disaster. People are becoming desensitized to what is happening in Palestine. And this is a major problem. And I think in terms of psychology and how to keep this, and I think the examples that are mentioned, personal stories, keep this alive. You heard the name of Hind. The coverage over Hind got a lot of coverage. Unfortunately, we are not numbers as Palestinians, but to the world, now 35,000, when it becomes 50,000 or 100,000, these are just numbers. And breaking them down to stories, I think, helps us get away from this idea, but we need to be able to sustain it. And we need to find ways, and this fitting with the last question, we do not have a strategy. And this is the worst. The Palestinians do not have a strategy for resistance. The Palestinians do not have a strategy for the liberation. And this, I'm talking about it, both sides of the identity of Palestinians. Neither the PLO has a strategy, nor does, unfortunately, Hamas have a strategy for the liberation. And let me take it a step further. Unfortunately, I feel the Palestinian leadership is complicit in the current genocide in Gaza. And I say this with a heavy heart, seeing Palestinians attacked by Palestinian police in Ramallah or across the West Bank. This is something that I keep getting told, we don't need to show our dirty laundry in front of everyone, but with the complicity of the Palestinian leadership. This is a leadership that's, as you said, there is no elections. The last time we talked about an election, Israel said Jerusalem will not be included, and they warned Mahmoud Abbas, if election takes place, then the resistance side will win. The Islamic, because people have had enough. They've tried Oslo, and it was a failure in every sense. And in this sense, the Palestinian leadership does not represent the Palestinian people anymore. And this, if we just talk about this and how we can replace and the voices of the youth, the problem is every time the youth raise up, they are assassinated either by Israel or they are imprisoned by the Palestinian Authority. They do not want alternative voices. And this needs the forms of resistance and showing the real face of the occupation and those who are complicit with the occupation, including Arab states, who are completely complicit, to a stage where, as Gaza is dying, we are giving Israel, unfortunately, lines of survival, whether unfortunately through trade through Turkey or through Jordan or through Dubai or through Egypt. It is a disaster, the situation we are in. Let me finish by saying that we need to develop a comprehensive strategy, and maybe people on the ground are developing their own strategies. You saw in Nablus, you saw in Jenin, the young people are developing their own strategies of resistance, putting everything, all the leadership aside. And they are coming together to resist the occupation. They're doing it at their level. I think our responsibility is to develop an international, because we cannot tell them what to do and what not to do. It is not our place. But let us develop an international resistance strategy against this Zionist occupation. Let's make the word Zionist back to its racist ideology in the world. People do not take pride in saying, I am a Zionist, like Joe Biden or the others who do this, and challenge them. And I think the only way we will succeed is to challenge the Zionist narrative at every corner and to lift up our expectations from the governments, push the governments further to the maximum, and to keep pushing ourselves as individuals and also NGOs to make sure that this will never happen again, inshallah.